What happened behind the scenes of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was even crazier than the movie itself. Johnny Depp was so deeply affected after making this film that his family and friends could barely recognize him. In fact, he carried a weapon everywhere he went, just like his eccentric character. Benicio del Toro had to get medical treatment to get his body back to normal. Meanwhile, director Terry Gilliam was out in the middle of New York City, literally setting fire to his Writers Guild card in front of dozens of cameras. Scrapped scripts, fired directors and actors on the brink of madness. That's right, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas wasn't just another movie. What happened during and after its production is still remembered in Hollywood as a string of excesses that nobody would ever recommend repeating. And today, we're going to tell you the whole story. All the information in our videos comes from research across interviews, books, and behind-the-scenes features included on Blu-rays, DVDs, and special editions. You can find some of these products in the video description. This story stars actors Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro, and director Terry Gilliam, but it all started with journalist Hunter S. Thompson. During his time at Rolling Stone magazine, he pioneered what became known as Gonzo journalism, where the reporter stopped being just an observer and actually became part of the story. Thompson took that idea to the extreme, mixing reporting, satire, and personal experiences to portray an American society that he saw as increasingly hypocritical and decadent. Thompson and Gonzo journalism truly became one in 1971, when he was assigned to cover a motocross race and a police narcotics convention in Las Vegas. He was joined on the trip by his friend, Oscar Zeta Acosta, a lawyer and activist he had been meaning to interview. What happened over those few days was so wild and out of control that Thompson decided to turn it into the novel that skyrocketed him to underground icon status, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The story follows Raoul Duke, Thompson's alter ego, and Dr. Gonzo, Acosta's alter ego, on a road trip fueled by excess, paranoia, and increasingly absurd situations. But beneath the delusions and hallucinations lay something much deeper, a disillusioned look at the end of the 1960s counterculture and the failure of the American dream. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was published in 2 parts by Rolling Stone in 1971, and later as a book, becoming a massive hit. Young readers saw it as a reflection of the crisis sweeping across the United States and a sharp satire of Las Vegas, viewed as the epicenter of consumerism and greed. To others, however, it was nothing more than a scandal. Its impact was undeniable, and the movie that followed wouldn't fall short either. But pulling off an adaptation of the book wouldn't be easy at all, at least not until Johnny Depp joined the project. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To understand how we got to that point, we need to go back a little bit. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas seemed like an impossible novel to adapt for the big screen, and Hollywood figured that out fast. In fact, for years it was trapped in what the industry calls development hell. The earliest attempts started in the 70s, when Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro considered the material after the success of Taxi Driver. Later, Oliver Stone wanted to turn it into a political critique of President Richard Nixon, while animator Ralph Bakshi pitched a mix of live actors and cartoons for the psychedelic sequences. Different casting projects, including names like John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Jack Nicholson, and Marlon Brando, didn't move forward either. Despite these failed attempts, around that time, Thompson inspired another movie, Where the Buffalo Roam, with Bill Murray playing the journalist. However, the film isn't based on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and it left a lot of fans even more eager to see a true adaptation. Attempts gained traction again in 1989, when the rights landed in the hands of Leila Nabulsi, Thompson's ex-partner and close friend. She knew it was a challenging project, and she had the ideal director in mind, Terry Gilliam. By that time, Gilliam had already made a name for himself with fantasy and sci-fi movies featuring anti-heroes who stood up to the system. Time Bandits and Brazil had cemented his reputation as a bold visionary. The director received a script for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and read it right away. He was a fan of the novel, and he felt the adaptation captured Thompson's irreverent tone, but he still turned it down. For one thing, he thought the draft started strong, but eventually unraveled into incoherence, a problem he felt the book had as well. On top of that, he had just finished The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, a massive production, plagued by delays, budget overruns, and corporate politics. We've actually dedicated a whole video to the details of that and other Gilliam productions. He was so burnt out that he simply didn't have the energy to tackle another counterculture project. Instead, he agreed to direct The Fisher King, an intimate drama with fantasy elements that was much more accessible to mainstream audiences. At that point, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas seemed like a truly cursed project that would never see the light of day, but the story was still far from over. Just when it seemed impossible to bring Thompson's novel to the big screen, Nabulsi teamed up with Rhino Films in 1992. They were an independent production company known for taking a chance on risky, unconventional projects. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas fit their philosophy perfectly, but finding a director and a cast was still an uphill battle. To direct the movie, Rhino Films reached out to Lee Tamahori, a New Zealand commercial director who would later transition to feature films. At the time, however, he had to turn the offer down due to commitments with different brands. Putting together a cast also proved to be complicated. The executive's top choice was John Malkovich, but by the mid-90s, he was considered too old for the part. Other candidates included Woody Harrelson and John Cusack, who was a huge fan of the novel and had even successfully adapted it for the stage. And then, Johnny Depp came into the picture. Around that time, he had become one of the most unique figures in Hollywood. While other actors chased commercial box office hits, he preferred strange, risky projects that stayed far away from the mainstream. When he got the offer to star in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he accepted immediately. He was a big fan of the book and of Thompson, and he was absolutely determined to play him. Depp impressed Nabulsi, but Thompson would have the final say. Even though he wasn't officially involved in the production, he essentially acted as the project's gatekeeper. In December 1995, the actor traveled to Aspen, where the author lived. They agreed to meet at the Woody Creek Tavern, a bar Thompson basically used as his office. Depp arrived first, and the author showed up a little later, proving he more than lived up to his legend. He was waving an electric cattle prod and a taser to clear a path through the crowd, yelling, "Out of my way, you bastards." That kind of entrance might have scared off any other Hollywood star, but Depp was absolutely fascinated. They spent hours talking about weapons and even built a homemade explosive together. Thompson quickly realized that Depp wasn't just another Hollywood actor looking for a quirky role. He truly understood the spirit of the book. So, at the end of their meeting, he asked him, "Listen, if they were to make a movie out of the Vegas book, would you be interested? Would you want to play me?" And we all know what the answer was. With Depp on board, the production of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas finally gained real momentum. The actor didn't sign on as a producer, but he did have a major say in the rest of the creative decisions. To play Dr. Gonzo, he suggested Benicio del Toro. He had just seen him in The Usual Suspects and was convinced he was perfect for the role. Rhino accepted the recommendation, and del Toro joined the project. The Puerto Rican actor was thrilled, though he had no idea of the massive challenge that was heading his way. But we'll get to that. The adaptation of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas already had its stars, but it was still missing a director. Depp had a suggestion for this too. Bruce Robinson, a filmmaker known for his sharp comedies. The actor thought he would be perfect for capturing the novel's unique humor and irreverence. Robinson heard the pitch, but ultimately turned it down politely. Meanwhile, the clock was ticking. The film rights to the novel were about to expire, and Thompson refused to grant any more extensions. Rhino Films needed to get the movie off the ground as soon as possible, so they stopped listening to Depp and hired Alex Cox instead. He seemed like a great choice. He had directed cult classics like Repo Man and Sid and Nancy, which featured bizarre characters dealing with extreme situations. After decades of failed attempts, the adaptation of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas finally seemed on track to become a real movie, but the true problems were just about to begin. If finding the cast and the director was difficult, preparing for the set was far worse. Rhino Films set a budget of $5 million. It was a low number by Hollywood standards, but it meant they could make the movie without a massive studio interfering. Cox started adapting the novel alongside his wife, screenwriter Todd Davies. The director was used to working with low budgets, but he struggled to bring his vision of the novel to life. In April 1997, Cox traveled to Aspen to meet with Thompson and get his blessing, but everything fell apart. The director started explaining how he wanted to film the movie, and when he got to the psychedelic sequences, he suggested doing them with animation. That's when Thompson screamed at him, "Write your own damn story, but don't mess with mine and turn it into a cartoon." He then threw him out of the house, making it perfectly clear he wanted absolutely nothing to do with him or his stupid ideas. Depp wasn't at that fateful meeting, but he found out the second Thompson called him on the phone. As soon as he hung up, Cox called to explain the situation from his point of view. But Depp coldly told him that he no longer respected him as a director because he had tried to overstep the novel's author, who was also now his friend. The actor then reached out to Nabulsi to express his frustration, and she was equally furious with the director. As a result, Cox was kicked off the project. Rhino Films paid him a $60,000 settlement. Though his involvement in this story didn't end there, but we'll get to that later. Suddenly, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was left without a director, and filming was fast approaching. The situation was critical. Depp and del Toro thought about walking away from the production. Rhino threatened to replace them and bring Cox back, and the film rights to the novel were still hanging by a thread. To prevent another failure, in May 1997, Nabulsi went back to the candidate who had turned her down years ago, Terry Gilliam. By that time, Gilliam's situation had improved quite a bit. Thanks to The Fisher King and 12 Monkeys, he had achieved both financial and critical success without compromising his obsessions. He was in a much better place mentally and financially, and he figured Hollywood hated him a little less. When he got the new call from Nabulsi, he finally felt he had the energy and confidence to take on the adaptation of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. As soon as he heard about the fragile state of the production, he wasn't scared off. In fact, he was drawn to the challenge. Gilliam was already on board for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but what would Thompson and Depp say? Without their approval, the deal was in jeopardy. The author thought it was a great idea. He considered him the only filmmaker in Hollywood crazy and brilliant enough to do justice to his psychedelic trip. He even agreed to extend the film rights. As for the star, he was absolutely convinced that no one would understand that universe better. Still, Gilliam's imminent arrival didn't fix the problems. Rhino Films didn't trust him because of his reputation for being difficult to work with and the budget issues on his past productions. The executives resisted hiring him officially, while Depp, Del Toro, Nabulsi, and Thompson pushed hard in the opposite direction. The production seemed to be heading straight toward a full-blown civil war until Universal Pictures stepped in. They didn't just buy up a huge chunk of the international distribution rights, they also pumped more money into the movie, bumping the budget from $5 million up to $17.5 million. It was still a pretty modest number for a massive studio, but it was a lot of money for a project that wasn't exactly independent anymore. On top of that, the new executives paid Depp and Del Toro $500,000 to stay on board, and they gave Gilliam the green light. They had just worked with him on 12 Monkeys and were really happy with what he did. With the production drama sorted out, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was finally ready to start filming. But if you thought the problems and the absolute madness were left in the rearview mirror, you have no idea what's coming next. After years of scrapped scripts, fired directors, and threats of cancellation, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas finally went into production. But as we said at the beginning, what happened next was even crazier than the story itself. Filming began on August 3, 1997, and by that time, the key players had prepared intensely. Having joined the project late, Gilliam read Cox and Davies' script to see if he could use it, but he hated it. It still just showed two guys doing mindless nonsense. He demanded to write a script from scratch, but he only had 10 days, so he called up Tony Grisoni, a British screenwriter he had been working with. Their goal was to faithfully capture the book's frantic energy, so he and Grisoni grabbed the novel and highlighted the parts they liked. In 8 days, they had a draft ready, but they thought it was so bad that they spent another 2 days rewriting everything, though they kept polishing the material during rehearsals. That very script would eventually trigger a major legal battle, but we'll get to that later. Gilliam's preparation was exhaustive, but the cast also faced their own challenges. To play Dr. Gonzo, Del Toro had studied Acosta, Thompson's lawyer friend, but if he wanted to truly embody the man, he had to look like him. He wasn't going to wear a fat suit. Instead, he decided to do something much more extreme: gain the weight. He started devouring half a dozen donuts a day, and in 9 weeks, he packed on an extra 40 pounds. As you can see, everyone involved in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was incredibly committed, but no one more so than Depp. He didn't just want to play Hunter S. Thompson, he wanted to be Hunter S. Thompson. During pre-production, he moved into the author's basement for 6 days to study him down to the smallest detail. In just a few days, he absorbed every single one of his mannerisms, his way of speaking, but it still didn't feel like enough. So he started stealing his clothes and wearing them right in front of the journalist himself. Even then, the star felt something was still missing. He needed that signature touch, and he found it by staring at his friend's receding hairline. Right then and there, he asked him to shave his head, and Thompson was more than happy to grab the clippers. Do you think Depp became obsessed with Thompson? You're right. And you're not the only ones. Just hours before filming started, the actor got a call from Bill Murray. Yes, the same guy who had already played the journalist on screen. Without beating around the bush, Murray told him, "Be careful, or 10 years from now you'll still be playing this character. Make sure your next role is someone completely different." Depp was confident about the movie and the part, but those words definitely left him thinking. Getting back to the filming, the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas crew moved to locations in Las Vegas and other parts of Nevada, but things quickly got complicated. Gilliam wanted to film in real casinos to capture the true spirit of Vegas, but a lot of places refused to cooperate when they heard the movie was all about vice and painted a pretty harsh picture of the city. That forced them to turn to older, somewhat forgotten casinos like the Riviera and the Stardust. But there were other issues here. The management at the Stardust would only let them shoot between 2 and 6 a.m. when the casino floor was at its emptiest. True to form, Gilliam accepted the challenge and coordinated his entire crew to make the most of every single second. Keep in mind that during this short window, they had to set up the lights and wide-angle cameras, get the actors through makeup, film the scenes, and tear everything down without leaving a trace. And it didn't stop there. They were only given 6 gaming tables for the extras to crowd around, and the casino insisted that the extras had to gamble for real. Were there any other conditions? Of course. if an extra happened to bump into a real craps table, or if the noise bothered a high-rolling slot machine player, management would revoke their filming permit right on the spot. Ultimately, Gilliam did manage to film inside real casinos, though he always knew that even the most lenient locations wouldn't be enough to capture the story's wildest moments of excess. One of the key sequences takes place at the Circus Casino, where the main characters experience their most out-of-control adventures. Since the casino's management refused to be involved, Gilliam decided to build his own version on a soundstage in Los Angeles. Renamed Circus Bazooka, the set became a grotesque caricature of the consumerism and excess the director was aiming to portray. The filmmaker also had to build custom hotel sets and rooms for Duke and Dr. Gonzo to completely destroy. And speaking of the main characters, as filming went on, the line between the actors and their characters started to blur, and that's when the intensity bordered on dangerous. From the very first scene he shot, Depp had become Thompson. Whenever Gilliam tried to give him notes, the actor would push back with comments about what the real author would or wouldn't do. But instead of causing friction, this dynamic actually brought them closer together. The director realized that nobody knew the character better than Depp himself. Still, that kind of extreme commitment brought some unexpected problems. Depp insisted on wearing Thompson's actual clothes, especially his trademark yellow sunglasses. That made a lot of close-ups a nightmare to film. The lights, the cameras, and even Gilliam were constantly reflecting in the lenses. Since there was no talking the actor out of it, the crew had to improvise filters, adjust the lighting, and come up with clever workarounds just to keep the look the star felt was absolutely essential. While Depp's transformation was impressive, Del Toro's was genuinely unsettling. On top of putting on a massive amount of weight, he stayed in character even when the cameras weren't rolling. His intensity during certain scenes caught both his castmates and the crew off guard. Everyone really felt it when it came time to film one of the film's most intense scenes. Duke and Gonzo pull up to a diner, where the lawyer harasses the waitress with highly inappropriate and morally questionable behavior. Del Toro was supposed to hurl degrading insults and wave his knife around. It was all in the script, but suddenly neither Gilliam nor Depp had any idea how the scene was going to end. Everyone on set thought he might completely go off script and do something crazy. In the end, Gilliam was thrilled. That sense of real danger helped capture the wild energy he wanted for the film. At that point, the crew thought nothing could top the chaos they had already seen, until Thompson showed up on set to film his cameo. As soon as he walked in, Gilliam noticed he was carrying a weapon. That immediately caused a lot of tension on set, since everyone was well aware of his volatile personality. Even so, the director got ready to work. He had written a flashback set in 1965 at the Matrix Club in San Francisco. Duke is walking through a crowd of hippies, clearly under the influence, until he stops in front of a bald man sitting at a table lighting a cigarette. He realizes he's looking at himself, even though it's actually the real Thompson. It was a simple scene on paper, but actually filming it was an absolute nightmare. For starters, the author arrived on set way later than scheduled, after spending hours in his trailer, indulging in behavior we can't exactly mention in this video. When he finally sat down, Gilliam started rolling, but Thompson refused to hit his marks. The director walked over to give him some direction, but the journalist completely ignored him. He tried doing a take, and when it wasn't working, he tried asking him to look in a specific direction, but Thompson just started yelling incoherent comments. The director made another attempt, but this time the author hurled insults at the crew, and just like that, Thompson ruined every single take. Did you think things couldn't get any worse? Listen to this. The extras recognized Thompson and swarmed him, completely forgetting about the movie. Instead of trying to keep the peace, the author started signing autographs, passing around his flask, and egging them on to make noise and keep interrupting the filming. Just like that, the set devolved into a full-blown underground party. That level of absolute chaos would have broken any other director's patience, but Gilliam was a veteran of turbulent productions, so he stuck the writer in a chair, pointed the camera right at him, and just filmed him, while Depp improvised walking around him. The director ended up salvaging the cameo in the editing room, stitching together clips that barely lasted 2 or 3 seconds. Once again, Gilliam figured that this anarchic energy was actually helping the movie. He had managed to create the film equivalent of Gonzo journalism, Gonzo cinema, but the entire film was in danger towards the end of filming. Before the start of one filming day, the crew remembered that the executives at Rhino Films still had authority over the production and were planning to show up on set. Gilliam, Depp, Del Toro, and Thompson put their foot down. They weren't going to let them anywhere near the place. Nabulsi felt the exact same way, so she went straight to Universal to stop them, and they pulled it off. Rhino Films didn't get anywhere near the crew. Despite a tidal wave of issues, the production for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas actually wrapped on schedule. However, Depp and Del Toro simply couldn't shake their character. Depp, in particular, kept acting exactly like the author, and even seriously considered walking around armed. Then he remembered Murray's phone call, warning him to step away from the character's spirit before it was too late. When he tried to return to his normal life, his family and friends literally couldn't recognize him. He was still talking like Thompson, with that slow nasal drawl, to the point where everyone practically begged him to let the character go. The actor realized he had to make a real effort to get his own identity back. As a first step, he accepted the first role that had absolutely nothing to do with Thompson. That's how he ended up playing an astronaut in the thriller The Astronaut's Wife. As for Del Toro, he planned to drop the extra weight immediately, but it wasn't that easy. He actually needed medical treatment to get back to his normal weight, and to stop wanting to stab people. As for Gilliam, he felt like he had just survived another storm and threw himself into post-production. But neither he nor anyone else could have imagined that things were about to get even more complicated. When the production for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas wrapped, Terry Gilliam thought he had survived every possible disaster. Spoiler, he was wrong. While polishing the final cut, he got a call from Grissoni with some shocking news. The Writers Guild of America had determined that the only credited writers on the script were Alex Cox and Todd Davies. Gilliam was stunned. He and Grissoni hadn't used a single word from that previous script. He called the Guild himself, and they explained their strict rules. When a director participates in writing a script, the Guild applies a much higher standard to give them credit. In this scenario, the filmmaker and director, along with their co-writer, must prove they wrote more than 60% of the material to get a credit. On the other hand, the original writers only have to contribute 33% to keep their names on the screen. And that wasn't even the most insulting part for Gilliam. He discovered that in the early press kits, the only credited writers listed were Cox and Davies. But Gilliam was used to a fight, so he and Grissoni went to Universal to appeal the WGA's decision. They put together a 25-page document comparing the two screenplays line by line. That task took them more than 10 days. In other words, it took longer than it did to write the actual script they shot. While the legal process was underway, Gilliam thought about more aggressive strategies. For starters, he put together a satirical short to be shown before the screening. In it, musician Ray Cooper appears, explaining that under WGA rules, the movie wasn't written by anyone. That short could have made the movie an even more bizarre experience. But in the end, the pressure paid off. The WGA ruled that Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas had been written by 4 authors. Gilliam and Grissoni would be credited as writers, ahead of Cox and Davies. The director could breathe a sigh of relief, but his anger was far from gone. Despite the WGA's verdict, Universal didn't want to reprint all the press kits, so he had to deal with Cox and Davies still being listed as the sole screenwriters. Caring absolutely nothing about the consequences, Gilliam started crossing out their names in protest. But the most shocking moment came on May 20th, 1998, 2 days before the premiere. Gilliam and Grissoni went to the Barnes & Noble at Lincoln Center in New York to promote the screenplay book. Taking advantage of the packed room and the BBC television cameras, the director detailed the nightmare they went through because of the union. When he finished, he walked outside, pulled out his WGA membership card, and set it on fire with a lighter, a protest 100% in true Gilliam style. After the union bureaucracy and all the previous struggles, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was finally ready to face its ultimate test, the general public. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas had a turbulent production, and its introduction to the world was no different. The first real test came in May 1998 when it was selected for the Cannes Film Festival. Depp, Gilliam, and Del Toro all showed up, ready to promote the project they had sacrificed so much for. But before the press conference even started, they realized the room was hostile. The film had just been booed during the screening for the media and journalists. Critics labeled it confusing, hard to swallow, completely unstructured, and depraved. Mentally prepared to face yet another hurdle, the team behind Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas went into the press conference in the best spirits possible. Depp defended his commitment to the role and to Thompson, and Del Toro backed up his co-star. As for Gilliam, he brought up the bureaucratic nightmare he was going through with the WGA, taking heavy shots at union officials and Hollywood as a whole. He also stressed how much it meant to him to honor the spirit of the book without making excuses to anyone. Finally, fully aware of the hostility coming from the journalists in the room, he added, "Whether people love it or hate it, I'm fine with it. It's indifference that I can't stand." But Gilliam, Depp, and Del Toro only cared about one opinion, Thompson's. They found out how he felt back in the United States during a test screening. The director sat right next to the author so he could catch his reactions. He also tried to see if Thompson was carrying his usual weapon, though he couldn't tell for sure. When the lights went down and the movie started, the director felt nervous for the first time. If the volatile author hated it, it would be the end of the film, and everyone who made it. And his fears seemed to come true when he noticed Thompson shifting constantly in his seat, suddenly screaming and jumping up and down like he was possessed. Gilliam braced for a disaster until he heard him shout, "Watch out, damn bats." Right then, the director realized what was happening. The author was reliving the exact trip that had inspired him to write the novel in the first place. But how far would that go? When the screening ended, Gilliam tried to slip out quickly, but Thompson intercepted him. The director waited for his verdict, and the writer opened his mouth to say he loved it. He thought Depp did an excellent job and argued that the movie worked because it had a solid script. Otherwise, it would have just been a random collection of absurd scenes. For the first time in years, Gilliam was genuinely happy. Thompson's enthusiasm could have paved the way for the success everyone wanted, but it never happened. When the movie hit theaters on May 22, 1998, only a handful of die-hard fans showed up to see this brand new style of Gonzo cinema. To make matters worse, it faced even more negative reviews in the US. Though it found a warmer reception in Europe, still it wasn't enough. It grossed $13 million worldwide against an $18.5 million budget. After decades of failed attempts, director changes, studio conflicts, a chaotic production, and a legal battle over credits, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas seemed destined for the same fate as so many other cursed productions: total failure. But that was about to change. By mid-1999, Gilliam, Grissoni, and Depp were working on pre-production for a new movie, The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, another cursed project we've actually covered in another video. One night, the director got a call from Napulsi with some unbelievable news. The film was blowing up on the home video market. The numbers showed it had become a massive favorite among American and European college students, to the point where it was all anyone was talking about in dorms and classrooms. They didn't see it as a failure, but as a completely unique experience. The director was thrilled, but he kept his cool. He had been through the exact same thing with his other movies, and he figured the hype would only last for a season. But the surprises kept coming. Within a few months, Gilliam started getting letters and reports from indie theaters that were setting up midnight screenings. According to the owners, people were showing up dressed exactly like Duke, wearing Hawaiian shirts, bucket hats, green visors, and cigarette holders. Others showed up as Gonzo, and they even knew every single line of dialogue by heart. The director didn't believe it until he actually went to one of those theaters to see it for himself. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was no longer what Hollywood calls a commercial flop. It was turning into a true cult phenomenon. The vindication also extended to the stars. Depp and Del Toro went on to achieve even greater success, but they always remembered the film as one of their most personal projects. They had taken a gamble on a novel they loved, defended its spirit against studios and producers, and finally found an audience willing to embrace it. The experience had been so intense and extreme that the physical and emotional toll lingered, but it had all been worth it. As for Hunter S. Thompson, he tragically passed away in 2005. But before his death, he got to enjoy a renewed interest in the novel and his entire body of work, all sparked by the movie. Depp never lost touch with him, even going so far as to fund his funeral and say goodbye to him as a true friend. In fact, the actor later got involved in adapting another one of his novels, The Rum Diary, though it didn't have the same cultural impact as Gilliam's film. Meanwhile, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas transcended cinema. Today, it has left a massive mark on pop culture, academic studies on the counterculture movement, and internet iconography. Its visuals, dialogue, and characters continue to circulate decades after its release, proving the lasting power of its imagery and its rebellious legacy. Thompson, Depp, Gilliam, and Del Toro were never looking for a run-of-the-mill hit. They were trying to capture the indomitable spirit of a book that had always broken the rules. Along the way, they lost arguments, money, and the favor of critics. In the end, Hollywood got a box office failure, but its creators got a classic. Thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, we recommend our video about the chaotic and amazing production of Rocky.